Number 10. All about the nuts. Privilege is something that most people abuse, using the power behind them to get what's in front of them, no matter how small or big it is. These are the people we hate the most, and frankly speaking, it's not that hard to find someone like this. For example, this passenger on a Korean flight who went absolutely nuts over a few nuts. On December 5, 2014, at the JFK International Airport, a rich young woman going by the name of Cho Hyun-ah entered the flight. She's the 40-year-old daughter of the airline's president, so obviously she has that air about herself. At that time, Miss Hyun-ah was sitting in the first-class cabin and was waiting for the other flight to take off. Usually during that time, flight attendants are supposed to hand out snacks to their first-class passengers. An unlucky male flight attendant served Miss Hyun-ah a few bagged nuts. Miss Hyun-ah got upset though and started lecturing the flight attendant, claiming that serving nuts on a plate should be the mandate and that she felt highly disrespected for being offered nuts in a bag instead. She made the man kneel down and bluntly requested an apology for not serving the nuts on a dish. She later ordered the man to leave the airplane, which he eventually did, but not before causing a 20-minute delay. This did not sit well with the airport authorities and the airline staff. Journalists soon began swarming in and harassing the airlines about what happened. A ton of officials also wanted Miss Hyun-ah to be charged with endangering the flight. Of course, the president took the right actions and apologized on his daughter's behalf. She was sentenced to 1 year in jail. However, most people believe that she also deserved a lot of community service. Number 9. The bottom burper. Have you ever been in a small room that has way too much stuff or people in it? Well, there are all kinds of things that could make people angry about being cramped up in a crowded place, from noisemakers to complainers. But there's nothing worse than someone who shamelessly passes gas in a cramped room, or in this case, plane. In February 2019, in a Dutch airline en route from Dubai to Amsterdam, a certain smelly situation arose. The flight had been pretty peaceful until an elderly man started releasing terrible gas. What's more, these farts came in batches of varying degrees, from silent squeaks to chaotic World War-level blasts. Eventually, this gets on the nerves of everyone on board, so a male passenger politely asked him to stop, but the moral assailant went on. There came a point when even the captain of the plane had to personally ask him to stop, but the old man couldn't help himself. He ignored all of their requests. That's when two Dutchmen, seated with the man, took matters into their own hands. They picked a fight with him, which soon took a violent turn. The issue escalated to the extent of the aircraft seeking an emergency landing. The Dutchmen had to deboard the plane, along with their companions, while the cause victoriously stayed on. It was later reported that though not jailed, the Dutchmen were banned from flying with the airline due to oral abuse and misbehavior. Who do you feel bad for in this situation? The old man who couldn't contain his gas, or the passengers that had to deal with it? Number 8. Headbutt over face mask. Apparently, one of the most dangerous attacks without any weapons is a headbutt, and it's certainly something that most of us wouldn't want to experience. Unfortunately for one male flight attendant, he experienced a headbutt in the most vicious way. On January 29, 2021, a 24-year-old intoxicated man named Daniel Hendry boarded a plane. This is amidst the pandemic, and Daniel Hendry refused to wear a face mask. He also popped open a bottle of vodka inside the plane, which, as we know, isn't allowed. Samuel Proietti, one of the flight attendants on board, tried to persuade Daniel Hendry to follow the guidelines. Unfortunately, instead of using his brain to comprehend the situation, Daniel used his head to further escalate it. Yup, he violently pulled the male flight attendant and headbutted him hard. Thankfully, in a swift motion, Proietti was able to avoid the direct contact, but the headbutt grazed his right cheek. No real damage was done. Right after that, Daniel was restrained by the airport police and charged with assault. However, that wasn't the only charge he received. He also had a sexual harassment complaint lodged against him by a female flight attendant on his way in. Seeing the situation that he was in, we can confidently say that he did not use his head very well. Number 7. Air brawl. You may have witnessed a brawl amongst large crowds springing up randomly on the streets, at school, or in a public area. These type of fights tend to hurt a large number of people, and that's when the authorities have to step in before things get worse. But what happens when such a brawl breaks out in a confined space where no one can reach you? The answer is chaos. On June 9, 2011, a Virgin Atlantic flight, which contained 229 passengers and 13 cabin crew, had set off on its course from London to Barbados. The plane contained a dozen British passengers, and unfortunately, most were intoxicated by the time the flight took off. While they were cruising at 30,000 feet, one of the families who was celebrating their birthday of their relative got too noisy, and they were told to quiet down by another group of passengers. They didn't like being hushed. It got to a point where the mother and father of the family started throwing punches with the annoyed passengers, and soon, like a pinball or a line of dominoes, everyone on board started fighting. The flight attendants rushed to help, and even the air marshal tried to step in, but the fight was already too heated to be stopped. Thankfully, the plane was nearing its destination, and the pilots had already requested an armed force of police to breach and stop the fight. Once the plane landed, the brawl broke up, and about 10 people were arrested. The mid-air ruckus left a large number of passengers with either a black eye or some bruises. Truly, the situation might have been quite terrifying, considering there was no way out. Number 6. Lap dance on the flight. On August 2, 2018, in an EasyJet airline from England to Spain, a rather strange scenario occurred. A woman, who seemed to have drank a little too much in flight, stood up and started giving free lap dances to male passengers and flashing her assets to everyone in the cabin. Contrary to what you might expect, nobody appreciated the lap dances. Eventually, the woman took it to another level and started doing cartwheels in the aisle and started tapping every passenger's head until one male passenger had had enough. He slapped her hand off his head, and that was more than enough encouragement for other irritated passengers to do the same. Eventually, the cabin crew was able to get everyone to calm down. The pilot informed ground staff of the obscenity that took place on board, and when the pilot touched the ground, the authorities were already waiting to escort the woman and the heated passengers away. Yikes. What would you do in this situation? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 5. The fight for the reclining throne. How often do we see people fighting over something so small it's comical? Quite often, but bet you haven't seen two full-grown men fight over the only reclining seat on the plane. On August 1, 2021, an American Airlines flight bound from New Orleans to Austin started off peacefully until two men started getting into an argument over a reclining seat. A bold man stepped in to stop the fight, and the crew was able to disperse the two, separating them into different rows. However, it was all well and swell until the plane touched down the runway, and as soon as the seatbelt sign went off, the two men were at it again. They literally started beating each other up in the aisle and in front of the other bewildered passengers. This time around, though, the man who had earlier stopped the two from fighting joined in. The pure chaos that unfolded was caught on camera, but eventually it was stopped. Once the fight came to a halt, the agitated men were escorted off the plane by law enforcement, and to think it was all over a reclining seat. Number 4. Sir, please return to your seat. Psychological experts say you'll never know when the person next to you will snap. Most people who snap commit unspeakable acts, and you definitely don't want one of them right next to you. Unfortunately for this next flight, one such person definitely snapped. On April 6, 2010, in a Delta Airlines flight, Bert Nappel, a 51-year-old banker on vacation, decided to sneak into first class despite having an economy seat. Of course, the cabin crew reacted accordingly, politely asking Mr. Nappel to return to his original seat, but Mr. Nappel refused. They kept asking him until he went totally crazy, eventually assaulting the flight attendant. His sudden outburst scared the crap out of the cabin crew, forcing them to lock the cockpit door just in case Mr. Nappel decided to bust in. Thankfully, a German soldier happened to be next to him, and on seeing the drama unfold before him, he jumped into action and without a hitch, restrained Mr. Nappel. The pilot then changed their course to the nearest airport, towards Manchester. Mr. Nappel was dropped off and arrested. He earned a fine of £1,000, which comes up to $1,300, and also a removal notice from his job. All he had to say the entire time was that he had a stomachache, and the first-class seats were the only seats that accommodated his pain. The flight attendant who was assaulted endured minor injuries, but was surely left traumatized. Number 3. Intoxicated Russian. On January 13, 2011, in a Metrojet flight bound for Egypt from Moscow, a 54-year-old businessman named Sergei Kabalov boarded the flight with his wife and 3-year-old daughter. Nobody, not even his family, were aware of what was going to happen next. While mid-flight, Mr. Kabalov started drinking to the point to where he could barely think. Eventually, he felt the urge to take a wee, but the bathroom line was too long. This triggered Mr. Kabalov, and as soon as the flight attendant tried to calm him down, he assaulted him. The rest of the cabin crew tried to help, but Kabalov tried to fight them too. Later on, Mr. Kabalov casually popped a cigarette and tried to break into the cockpit. He threatened that he'd hijack the plane, while also referring to himself as Russian intelligence, the equivalent of CIA, who don't have to think twice before killing anyone. However, this claim was completely bogus. At that moment, all the passengers feared for their lives, but thanks to the cockpit lock, Mr. Kabalov was held off. Eventually, the pilot made an emergency landing, and the airport officials immediately restrained Kabalov. He ended up paying an $11,300 fine and served 3 years in jail. Number 2. Whoa, man. It's not just men who can sexually assault women. In fact, it can turn out to be far worse when it is woman on woman. On May 9, 2016, in an Alaska Airlines flight to Las Vegas, a 26-year-old woman named Heidi McKinney sat next to another woman in the same row. Everything was normal at first, but things slowly took a turn when McKinney decided to reach over and touch the woman beside her. This obviously made the woman uncomfortable and disgusted. She called the cabin crew in an effort to get McKinney off of her. Once McKinney was tied to her seat, the pilot requested the authorities in LAX about the unusual incident. McKinney was fined $2,500 for third-degree sexual abuse and was sentenced to county jail for an unknown period of time. It still remains unclear why McKinney thought of doing such a thing. Whatever the case, McKinney sure did learn her lesson the hard way. And number 1. Mystery Flight. On May 7, 2017, an Oakland-bound Southwest Airlines flight was on a stopover in Burbank, California, when a brawl erupted between two men. No one knows why this fight even started, but it ended up being so vicious that one of the men, identified as Chaz Cable, was arrested and charged with 2 counts of misdemeanor battery. The other passenger involved in the fight suffered a bruised eye, a chipped tooth, and had to get stitches on his nose. Who do you think they were fighting over? Thanks for watching. Which of these passengers is the craziest to you? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time.